First, okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first seminar for this fall 2021. What a privilege it is to have Dr. Hicks from Rice University join us for this seminar. Dr. Hicks is a professor and chair of the Computational and Applied Mathematics Department at Rice University. He had his master's from He had his master's from South Texas University and PhD in computation and applied mathematics from Rice University. And Dr. Hicks was a faculty member in industrial and systems engineering at Texas A&M and also served as a faculty advisor for the president of Rice University. In terms of research, Dr. Hicks has research interest in combinatorial optimization, graph theory, and integer programming applications in big data, imaging, social networks, and logistics. He's a recipient of the 2005 Optimization Prize for Young Researchers from the Optimization Society of Informs and the 2010 Forum Moving Spirit Award from Informs for his work with the minorities issues of Informs. He's also an Informs Fellow. He was named an Informs Fellow in 2020. Please join me welcome Dr. Hicks. Dr. Hicks, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Joseph. So this talk is maybe a little ambitious because I like to pile a lot of stuff, but I may not be able to get through everything, and that's okay. But let's start. So first I want to just, mention all the people I've worked with. The people in red are all my former students. As you can see, I have a lot that go to, okay. Technically, these are all the collaborators related to the research I'm presenting today. I do have more than 4 students. I have more than this many. I don't know how much more, but I do have more. But I do have a lot of them at Amazon. So Amazon owe me some money. Okay. And of course, I work with Baskey, and I also work with Foes. So I have some nice Oklahoma State connections. So just kind of an outline, I'm gonna talk about cohesive subgroups and graphs. This should be very similar to what things that Baskey has done, but I'm gonna talk about something kind of recent related to, first I'm gonna talk about K-Plexes, and then I'm gonna talk about the K-core polytope. Something I recently just got accepted. Next, talk about matroid girth and co-girth in relation to placement of sensor networks. This is kind of relatively old, so I may skip it. Next is something more recent. Actually, it got accepted last spring. So this is kind of related to data security and how message passing through kind of cyber security connected paths. And then the next one is the maximum nullity zero forcing. Is something I've been doing for the past 3 or 4 years. We'll talk about, I think we're talking about power domination in this one aspect. Feel free to ask me any questions. I try to keep this as casual as possible, And first is, I forgot to mention that it was a pleasure being invited. I really appreciate it. And it's good seeing everybody. All right, so can I tell you my secret now? So my secret is that basically I see graphs everywhere. Everything is related to a graph, right? Basically, graphs are just a way to kind of look at relationships between humans, between people. Humans are people. Between machines, between cities, between people and cities, just between data, right? It's basically showcasing the relationship of things. So what is a graph? This may be basically everybody, well, I don't know. I don't know the audience, so I'm gonna assume that some people may not know what a graph is. So a graph is basically 2 sets, a vertex set, which is basically the circles, and an edge set, which basically shows the relationship between the circles. Okay, and so for this talk, we're basically considering undirected graphs. So there's no direction. So you can, if they had a direction, you can think of these like one-way streets. And we can talk about neighbors. So if this is my vertex V, and here are my neighbors of V, is everybody I share an edge with. We can talk about cliques, right? Kind of like you had in high school. Everybody sat at the same table, everybody knows each other. We can talk about stable sets or independent sets. Those are the people who don't know each other. Maybe they should, but they don't. Just to give a brief intro on this relationship. So, like I said, networks are everywhere. They show up related to the brain. I did some work with K-cores, looking at the pockets of memory in the brain. They show up in genes, so gene co-expression networks. They show up in actually Van Gogh paintings. So how all these paintings are connected, they actually were cut from the same cloth. So Van Gogh would basically buy a big roll of cloth and then actually paint on particular, cut the paintings from that cloth. Some other applications, criminal network analysis, data mining, wireless networks. I already talked about genes, and I already talked about neural networks. Kind of pop quiz, right? So here is a graph. It's a social graph, so it's related to people. I don't know. Do we have the capability for other people to talk? I guess so. So chime in if you know what this graph is related to. If you don't, I'll wait like 5-10 seconds and I'll tell you. Anybody? For people that probably seen this talk before, like Basket, you're excluded. So Basket would know. Maybe Austin's probably excluded as well. Okay. For the people that haven't seen it, this is the 9/11 terrorist network. So these are all the people. This is all the information that we've gleaned after the attack. So, but it would have probably been beneficial if we actually knew these relationships beforehand. And as you can see, 23 is a hot person. He knows a lot of people. That's basically Atta. Okay. 17 was also infamous Al-Shahiri. Okay, I usually run this clip, but I may not actually have time. It's basically, well, maybe, let's see if I can run it.
Bart, since I'm not talking to Lisa, would you please ask her to pass me the syrup?
Please pass your father the syrup, Lisa. Bart, tell Dad I'll only pass the syrup if it won't be used on any meat product. You dunking your sausages in that syrup, homeboy?
Bart, tell Bart I just want to drink a nice glass of syrup like I do every morning.
Tell him yourself. You're ignoring Lisa, not Bart.
Bart, thank your mother for pointing that out.
Homer, you're not talking to me. And secondly, I heard what you said.
Lisa, tell your mother to get off my case.
Dad, Lisa's the one you're not talking to.
Bart, go to your room.
Why don't you?
Okay, so in this thing, we had Homer, right? Homer got really confused, but he was really trying to ignore Lisa, right? He would talk to Marge, he would talk to Bart, and Lisa would talk to Marge, and Lisa would talk to Bart, but actually there should have been no communication between Homer and Lisa. So what you can see is that, even though they had this relationship and there was no there wasn't supposed to be direct communication between the two, they still act as a family unit. Now, Maggie's just always there because Maggie's chilling. And so we automatically accept Maggie. So what does it mean to be cohesive, right? So this has been debated by social scientists. There's 3 general properties. Familiarity, that's basically kind of related to few strangers. The next one is basically quick communication. So I can quickly relay information between the group, okay? And then the third is basically robustness. Basically, I cannot be easily destroyed by maybe removing a member or not. So is this graph cohesive? I mean, if you really look at it, it is, but I mean, it's certainly not a clique. So clique is kind of too restrictive. So how do we avoid this? Well, not avoid it, but how can we look at cohesion in social networks or data networks that are not cliques? Well, we can always relax the requirement, the cliqueness requirement, right? So we can relax the distance between members, and that's the K-clique and K-club, right? We can relax the familiarity. So the number of neighbors between members, that's K-plex and K-core, okay? There's others like F group, LS sets, lambda sets, quasi-cliques, K-trusses. Like every year, there's a new kind of variation. Basket laughing because he knows it's true. Okay. So just in terms of K-plexes, right? What is a K-plex? So given a graph and some integer K that's strictly positive, a set is called a K-plex if every node in S has at most K-1 non-neighbors in S. So in a way, we're kind of restricting the non-neighbors in the group. So cliques are one-plexes, right? So 1 minus 1 is 0. So there's 0 non-neighbors, you're basically a clique. It's actually NP hard to find the maximum K-plex, right? We'll call it omega K of G. So if we look at the one-plexes, right? One-plexes are cliques. We'll have this particular triangle. We'll have this particular triangle. Okay, and that's pretty much all you can find, all the cliques you can find in the Simpson social network. If we're talking about two plexes, so then you can have at most one non-neighbor. Literally, I can take all 4 except for Maggie, right? That's a 2-plex. Even if there was no communication between Bart and Marge, that's also a 2-plex. And then the other 2 plexes are basically Maggie with anybody else. Okay. All right, so in terms of the terrorist network, I just wanted to highlight a few kind of 2 plexes. Right, so that's one, that's another one. And so you can kind of see the cohesion, right? Even though, you know, nefarious or criminal networks try to minimize their exposure of communication, you can still find things and use things to kind of say, okay, these people are cohesive. Here's another one. Sorry, I was 3. I thought it was only 2. Okay. So how do I attack the problems, right? I know this is an IE department, so the only 2 ways I know how to do it is basically combinatorial or graph algorithms, right? And polyhedral combinatorics, so integer programming, right? So this is more for, you know, maybe there's some senior graduates, first-year graduate students in the audience, or some senior undergrads in the audience. So kind of what is polyhedral combinatorics? You have some particular linear program, but that's not what you really want. You really want to solve it where these variables are integer. And so actually you want to solve it over this kind of lattice. But what you know so far is basically these inequalities. What you really need are these kind of red inequalities that define the convex hull of those integral points, right? So polyhedral combinatorics is, okay, we model the problem as an integer program. We have some LP relaxation, and then we try to find or try to prove that some inequalities are actually valid, not for the LP relaxation, but for the convex hull of the integral points. Okay? To hopefully help solve these things faster. And you know, if we're really close, right, it's a facet, and the facets are like the holy grail. Sometimes you can prove that things are facets, sometimes you can't. It's kind of based on the dimension of the problem. In terms of combinatorial algorithms, some things I've done are just kind of these 4, there's probably some more, just working with K-Plexes, K-Plex coloring. There's actually 2 papers on that. K-core, that's the one I did with my student. She's at SAP now, but it was related to the pockets of memory in the brain. And then the Co-2plex and these kind of claw bull-free, we still need to get this paper out. Like what happens when your student leaves before the finishing the paper, but yeah, we'll get it out. So what I want to talk about today, in terms of Polyhedral Combinatorics, right, is K-Plex polytope, with Baskey and Sergey. And then also my student Ben, we did Co-2plex polytope. That's the 2-club polytope with Baskey and Fold. And then the one that just got accepted like maybe 2 weeks ago is a K-core polytope. And that's what I'm gonna talk about today. So what is a K-core? So given a graph, a K-core basically, I say big K is a subset of vertices such that the mean degree is K, right? So what you want to do is you want to finding the largest K-core is polynomial, right? You can easily do it. I mean, basically if a particular node doesn't have degree K, you can just basically get rid of it. And what's left will be your largest K-core. The problem is actually finding the smallest K-core is NP hard. And has, like I said, application in neuroscience. Here's a 3-core, right? Every node has min degree 3 within the node-induced subgraph. But actually this one has node 4, but I mean, it has at least 3. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay. All right, so how do we model this, right? So basically, let's look at the adjacency matrix, right? So given an adjacency matrix, what is an adjacency matrix? It's basically a n by n matrix where column U, row V, or row U, column V, has entry 1 if UV is an edge in the graph. And so it's a symmetric matrix. So one can model the minimum weight K-core with the following system, right? I have my adjacency matrix times X is equal to greater than or equal to K times X. So for every, and X is a binary, that's basically telling me who's in my set. And then I know that I need at least K+1 members to be a K-core. Okay. Any questions? We good? Okay. Let me also know if I'm going too fast. I'm known to talk kind of fast. So what other inequalities can we think of, right? And so that kind of got me and Derek kind of thinking. And we kind of looked at, okay, you have K-core, what can smaller, like less than K core help? And so we looked at these kind of Q-core transversals. So given just what a definition of a transversal is, basically given a family of vertex subsets, say S, a transversal is basically a subset of vertices that intersect every subset of X, right? So basically if I delete T, then I lose the property of all these members in S. So we will use Q-core transversals, where Q is strictly less than K. And we actually show that these guys correspond to new inequalities for the K-core polytope. So let's just think about it. Okay, what does a transversal of minimum 1 cores correspond to? Just think about it. Like what is a 1 core, right? And basically, the min degree of the nodes has to be at least 1, right? So if I do a transversal that touch every 1 core, what am I really doing? Did somebody say you're basically looking at the transversal of edges? that's what you're doing. So it's basically corresponds to a minimal vertex cover. Okay. How about a 2-core transversal minimal 2 cores? Right. So every so a 2-core is basically the min degree is a 2. So it's kind of like in the like the simplest case, you're looking at a bunch of cycles. So you want to look at a set of nodes that intersect every cycle and traversal cycles. That's the feedback vertex set problem. Okay. So what we showed is that if you have this script SQ, a set of minimal Q cores, and you have this transversal, then the set of this transversal has to be at least K minus Q plus 1. So if it's strictly less than that, so when I take T out, right, then that means the min degree just dropped. The min degree of somebody dropped. Okay, the degree of everybody kind of dropped to Q minus 1, but then I do Q minus 1 plus this, right? I'll get something that's strictly less. Okay, the cardinality T plus my Q minus 1. That's going to be strictly less than K, but then that would contradict that you actually a Q core. So you need that you need at least this bound. So that's kind of what we proved. We showed that it's valid, right? We haven't showed that as a facet, but I mean, it's also computationally useful, right? It's not like we got to compute the minimum vertex cover or the minimum feedback set. You can compute minimal, right? And still hopefully get separating inequalities. All right, so how much time we have? Wow, okay. We started, okay. Let's see how much we can go with the girth. So, I mean, I apologize because I didn't include any computation results from that, but we do have computation results, and they're actually pretty fast using this kind of technique. So let me move next to matroid girth. I may go through this fast because I really want to talk about the rainbow because I thought it was cool. It's cool, right? It's coloring. I like colors. Everybody like colors. All right, what is not a matroid? All right, it's not an asteroid. It's not an android. It's not even a governator. Right? These are not the roids you're looking for. It's not opioids. It's not steroids. It's a matroid. Okay, what is a matroid? So given a family, finite set, you can deem what your family of sets is called independent, right? You get to choose what independence means. So the two, S and I, form a matroid if it satisfies these 3 properties. 1, the empty set is automatically independent. 2, any subset of independent set is also independent. And then the third is basically if I look at any subset of S, every maximal independent subset, let's say, if I look at a subset of S, let's call it A, every maximal independent subset of A has the same cardinality, and that's called the rank. So matroids, you've been dealing with matroids for a while, you just didn't know it, right? There's linear matroids, right? Where independence is basically linear independence, right? There's cycle matroids where independence is basically correspond, where the finite set is over the edges, and independence is defined by basically being acyclic, so no cycles. All right, so a matroid is called graphic if it's a cycle matroid of some graph. And just some matroid terminology. We can talk about the bases, right? And that's all the maximal independent subsets of S. We can talk about a circuit, that's a minimal dependent set. We can talk about a co-circuit. That's basically a minimal transversal of every basis. And then we can talk about the girth and co-girth. So the girth is basically the cardinality of the smallest circuit. The co-girth is the cardinality of the smallest co-circuit of a matroid. So why is this relevant? Okay, so in terms of reliability of sensor networks, this is basically related to the co-girth of a matroid. In terms of compressive sensing, right? Minimize the zero norm of AX equal B. This is actually related to the girth of a matroid. So the girth, well, it won't tell you actually the actual values of X, but it will definitely tell you the support for X. It'll tell you exactly what elements of X will not, that won't be zero. So like I said, both problems correspond to finding the girth or co-girth of a matroid. In terms of degree of redundancy, I actually go a little bit further to kind of explain this, right? So we have this. So the degree of redundancy is 1 minus the co-girth of HT, where H, let's see, was H is defined by, you have your system there. In terms of, oh, okay. So here I'm basically showing that the girth and co-girth can be basically described by a set covering, as set covering problems. So you minimize C transpose X, AX greater than equal to 1, X binary. For co-girth, the rows of A are the bases of the matroid. For girth, the rows of A are the complements of the bases of the matroid. Right? There's polynomial time algorithm, and it's actually, you can separate these inequalities, these rows of A in polynomial time, right? Because it's related to matroids. And we actually kind of give some example, not examples, I'm tripping. This is related to the co-girth, and these are the particular matrix classes. These are the sizes. This is the average degree of redundancy. This is the average time that Kiafor, Huda, and Dean did back in 2011. And here's our average runtime using basically the set covering formulation. So we only lost, okay, let's see. Okay, we beat one, we lost here, but we actually, this is significant. So here they only were able to solve one instance. We actually solved them all, and the average time was 186. All right. So that was fast. I apologize. Moving forward, let's talk about rainbow connection. So this is relative, yes? Somebody have something to say? Okay. So when you think of rainbow connection, you kind of think of Kermit the Frog singing Rainbow Connection. If you click on this, there actually is a link to the video where Kermit is singing. But rainbow connection also has things kind of related to security or cybersecurity. So this problem was first introduced by Chartrand back in 2008. It was originally intended to model the flow of classified information between government agencies in the aftermath of September 11th. And it kind of boils down to what is the minimum number of passwords or firewalls needed that allows one or more secure paths between every two agencies, such that the passwords along the path are distinct. Let's try to explain this through a graph. So first, just define what it means to be connected. A graph is connected if every pair of vertices is connected by a path. A rainbow, so given an edge coloring, let's call it F, going from the edges to some numbers, odd colors, A path in G is rainbow if every edge of P has a distinct color. All right. Oh, I did the illustration before for the words. That's okay. So a connected graph is strongly rainbow connected if there exists an edge coloring such that every pair of vertices U and V is connected by a rainbow path of length equal to the shortest distance, so the shortest UV path length. And then the smallest K for which the G is rainbow connected is called a strong rainbow connection number. So here, the different colors actually correspond to basically what the, so another way to think about it is, right, okay, so I have this rainbow path and I know what my shortest path is from agency A to agency B. I can wrap my message in this many layers based on the colors. And every time it goes through an immediate agency, they'll just peel off one layer, but they won't see the real message until the last agency finds the message. So here's a strong rainbow color of the graph. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 colors are needed for this graph. Okay. Any questions? I know I may have to end on rainbow, and that way we can have at least time to talk and have discussions. So what we know is that the diameter is a lower bound on the rainbow connection number. So the rainbow connection number is just any path. The strong rainbow connection is basically the shortest path, and the upper bound on that is basically the number of nodes minus 1. The strong rainbow connection number is NP hard to compute. It is polynomial for trees, cycles, wheels, and some other kind of simple graphs. But overall, it's pretty hard to solve. So this is joint work with my student Logan, David Milbrath, who was a former Rice graduate student. And we basically proposed the only known general computational method for this problem. Like before, the number of problems that you could solve was probably no more than 10, 20 nodes. It was just that bad. So we solve an IP as a series of small feasibility problems, but we also generate these Clique inequalities that I kind of want to talk about. All right. So an edge, say, separates a pair of vertices UV. If I delete it, the shortest path between UV actually goes up. Okay. So given a graph, I can basically make a new graph called H, where the nodes of H basically correspond to the edges of the original graph. And 2 edges are adjacent in H, right? 2 edges of the original graph are adjacent in H if there exists a pair of vertices in G separated by both E and F. So here's my G, right? I can pick A, B, and E, F. Clearly, if I delete A, B, right, that's between A and anybody. If I delete E, F, that's between F and anybody. So I can create this other graph called H. Right? So you got A, B, E, F. AB is connected to everybody. EF is connected to everybody. BC is connected to CE. BD is connected to DE, and vice versa. So this is all of H, you know, kind of. Well, yeah, it's all. So what can you see? What can you glean from this? I should have did the colors first. Okay, So you see kind of how I came up with the coloring for G is basically off the coloring of H. Right, so this is for people that don't know about colorings. A vertex coloring is basically a coloring of the nodes such that if two nodes have, if there's an edge between the two nodes, then they can't have the same color. So that means every color class is a stable set. And you can see that here, that every color class is a stable set. But these coloring can also be transferred over here. So the strong rainbow, well, basically we showed the other way, that the strong rainbow connection of G is an upper bound on the coloring number. I don't know why we didn't actually show the other way. I truly believe it's actually equal, but I don't think we actually showed the other way. So what we did is that we know that this is hard to compute. So we basically took the lower bound of that, which is basically the Clique number of H. So the Clique number of H is also a lower bound, right? Because this is an upper bound. This is upper bound on the coloring number, but the coloring number is upper bound on the Clique number of H. So we basically just found cliques in H and shoved those in as inequalities for our IP model. Any questions?
Illya, can I ask a quick clarification question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you remind me again on the strong rainbow connectivity? So rainbow connectivity is basically you color the edges so that between every pair of vertices, the path, shortest path has
Okay,
distinct colors?
so strong is the shortest path.
Okay.
Rainbow is basically like there exists a path that's rainbow.
Okay. There exists some path with distinct colors, whereas for strong rainbow connectivity, there exists at least one shortest path with distinct colors.
That's right.
Okay.
And that's why a strong rainbow is actually harder than regular rainbow, because you have to make sure it's at least one of the shortest paths has to be in there.
And so you had an upper bound, or was it a lower bound? I guess it was an upper bound of number of vertices minus one. So that's basically you find like a spanning tree and then assign different colors to the different edges. So you get a rainbow coloring, at least one path with rainbow coloring. Is that
right?
How you get that upper bound? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But that won't be enough for, that won't be valid for strong rainbow connectivity, right?
I mean, it's an upper bound, but it won't be, you know, it isn't. So the strongest, like you're trying to find the smallest edge coloring that works.
Right. Now I was thinking, wouldn't you like rainbow coloring is easier than strong rainbow coloring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you would likely need more colors to do strong rainbow coloring than rainbow coloring.
That's true.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
that's right. Let me see if I can go back real quick. Yeah. Okay. So strong rainbow is an upper bound on rainbow. So
okay.
you actually need more colors for strong rainbow.
Right. Okay.
But this one is harder.
Okay. Yeah, I could see the inequality between rainbow coloring and n-1.
Mm-hmm.
Although I don't right now see the relationship between strong rainbow coloring and the tree. N-1, at least not with how I was thinking about it.
Yeah, so I mean, you could basically you could take the spanning tree, right? Like you said, color it, but then you have to kind of fill in the other colors for the edges for the back edges, kind of.
Okay.
But
okay.
I think I can't remember. I had to go back to the paper if I don't want to.
I'll talk to you offline then. Yeah.
And I'll send you the paper. I'll send you the paper. Let's see, what time is it? It's 3:10.
So you still have from 20 minutes.
I said, okay, I guess I can talk about maximum nullity. That's fine. So, you know, if I'm talking about zero forcing, I'm a big Star Wars fan, so the force is my ally. So what is zero forcing? So let's talk about maximum nullity in a way. So given a family of symmetric matrices with the same non-zero pattern, right? So they're symmetric, they have this non-zero pattern. So you can think of these black boxes as basically being where there's going to be values that are not zero. You automatically know where the zeros are, right? And on the diagonal, they can be anything. You want to find the out of this family that look like this, that have this kind of mask, you want to find the matrix with the smallest rank. Okay, so this has a lot of applications related to recommender systems. It has some kind of relationship to quantum control. So since it's symmetric, right, you can kind of relate this to a graph where the non-zero elements correspond to edges, right? Kind of like the adjacency matrix, but instead of ones, you can be any number. And on the diagonal is basically like values on the nodes. So before I explain what zero forcing is, they basically show that zero forcing is an upper bound on the maximum nullity. So the maximum nullity is, it was actually the holy grail of what people is trying to look for. It's called the minimum rank of a graph. It has some other kind of applications. But in this group, this AIM group back in 2008, they showed that this other kind of graph dynamic process gives an upper bound. So let me quickly go into that. So it's kind of, the zero forcing is kind of based on some type of color rule. So initially you have some node that you color. So you color some initial node set, but then you have this color changing rule, is that if node U can color a node V, if V is the only uncolored neighbor of U. So this is U, I can color V because, okay, let me see. Did I write this right? Basically, I can force this guy to be colored because this guy is the only uncolored neighbor of me. So I can color this one, I can color that one, and I can color that one. So that's the next step. I just put them a different color so you can see that this guy was my initial set, and here's a step in one iteration, and then here's another iteration, and then finally you can color them all, right? And so the zero forcing number is basically the smallest set of nodes that you could zero force everybody else. Okay. So what stops zero forcing? Like suppose I didn't choose a zero forcing set. Suppose I chose, you know, these two, right? And now I'm gonna try to color, try to force a color, right? So I color that one, right? That's the only one I can color so far. I can color that one, but eventually I'm stuck, right? I can't color this one because he's not the only uncolored neighbor of me, all right? I can't color this one because he's not the only uncolored neighbor of me. Same is true for this one and that one. So what happens is that this thing is called you know, this is like an obstruction set to zero force. Me and my student Caleb call them forts. And basically a fort is a set of nodes such that every node outside the fort has either zero neighbors or at least two neighbors in the fort. Why did he call them forts? It's because he looked at, you know, kind of medieval forts, and it kind of looks like, you know, at least two neighbors inside the fort. So we showed that if S is a zero forcing set, if and only if it it traverses every fort. So it's a minimal transversal of every fort in the graph. So there's a story that's going to come out, I think, in AMS that talks about the zero forcing. And the way the writer put it is like there has to be a spy in every fort. So I can't break the fort. I need a spy to be inside the fort so I can capture the fort. So you can think of it that way, right? So a zero forcing set is basically a set of spies such that there's a spy in every fort in the graph so I can dominate the forts. So one application we'll talk about is power domination. So if people don't kind of remember, there was a blackout, like I guess it was 2013. So back in 2002, these 4 people modeled power grids observability as graph coloring changes process. But basically somebody else showed that it's kind of related. Yeah, so Bruini and he showed that's kind of related to this simplified rule of like almost like zero forcing. You basically color all the vertices and you color some vertices and you color everybody they're adjacent to. And then in the next steps, you basically just use the zero forcing rule. And they call it power domination. And so you can think about, okay, in terms of what does it relate to in real life? It kind of relates to the placement of these phase measurement units on the power grid. And you want to make sure you place them such that, you know, you can observe the whole grid. So here is kind of like a grid, a power grid, right? If we place these two, then, and first rule is they get colored and then their neighbors get colored, right? And then it's basically just zero forcing, but that covers everybody. Right, so this is called a power domination number, the smallest cardinality of a power dominating set. So in this case, the power domination number is basically 2. You can also talk about forts in terms of power domination. So suppose I chose the wrong 2, right? These kind of get colored, these guys get colored, but then those get colored, but eventually I can't color anymore, right? It's literally a fort. And so we basically showed that, you know, a set is a power dominating set if and only if every fort neighborhood, so is traversed by the power domination set. So not just the fort, but also the neighborhood of the fort. So here is a fort, but you need to actually also, it's actually faster. You want to traverse the neighbors of the fort as well. So all this can be formulated as set covering problems, right? We re-implemented Brinkov, MySQL, all 3 of my students. I don't know why I'm not on this paper, but all 3 wrote a paper. And we kind of used this because they had like an infection model. And then basically we did the kind of set covering model. And we're just basically going to test it. So here's the infection model. Here's this separation algorithm that we basically use to set covering, where we can find these kind of minimal fort neighborhoods and add them to the IP formulation. And you can actually see how fast the set covering formulation is compared to the infection model. And these are like some huge graphs. So this is probably P-GACE is probably one of the largest electrical grids. And this is, we basically took these from IEEE, you know, test instances. So these are actually related to power grids. Excuse me. Okay, it's 20 minutes. We're done. Future work, these zero forcing, these forts are kind of like support vectors of null vectors, right? Related to matrices, but basically these minimal forts, they should correspond to circuit families of linear matroids. And so at the heart of it, I was trying to think about using matroid theory to actually go back to the original problem of finding the minimum rank of a graph. So that's one slide. Also has the application of quantum control. The second slide, basically something back from my dissertation as a graduate student, I was talking about these things called branch decomposition. It's a way to decompose a graph into a tree-like structure. But you can do branch decomposition not on just graphs, you can do it on matroids, and you can actually do it on data, so related to imaging. So that's another, as a second future work. Just third is basically something related to Austin, is equitable redistricting, right? Because these are basically, you can think of this as districts, as graphs, political tracks as nodes, right? And then it's all about kind of clustering. So I'm working with Austin's former student, Hamid, and he's doing an excellent job down here at Rice. So with that, I'm done. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Hicks. That was a very, very insightful presentation. I mean, I did enjoy it. Some part I got lost because of all the computations, but I guess folks who understand what you did really did enjoy as well. I have a question though. I don't know whether I'm being biased, being the one moderating this, but I have a question, and it relates to your work in neuroscience, because I deal with brain data, EEG data.
Okay.
I'm looking to studying the temporal dynamics of the brain, and so Baski and I and Yuan are looking at things of that nature. Can you advise on what the character of the artist as far as this is concerned?
I only have one paper in mathematical neuroscience.
Oh, dear.
So I'm not an expert in neuroscience. So what?
So
So
that's still infinitely more papers than myself, Juan, and Joseph put together. So that's still useful for us.
Yeah. So there was a guy here. He retired. His name was Steve Cox, and he was like big in neuroscience. So he's the one that kind of got me interested, because he was looking at these neurons and how they fire, right? And so if you smell something or you see something, and it the neuron related to that fires, and depending on the threshold to its neighbors, it starts everybody else firing. So in the end, what happens in your brain is, like, you smell something, you see something, you get back a whole memory related to something, right? And so what happens is that these kind of these masses of neurons actually look like K-cores. They have to have some type of minimum degree to kind of had to have enough people firing for them to fire. And so that's kind of where I came in on, from just the kind of the network part of it, not necessarily for the measurements and of all that. So I don't.
Oh, probably I should ask a question again. So I'm looking at using graph theory, right, to be able to look at if we could see any distinctive graphs, or using any measurement to see if you're given two different stimuli, for example. Can we use graph theory to distinguish between brain activity, neural activity?
I mean, maybe, right? Because you could, you mean in terms of how things fire? Okay, these neurons turned on compared to these ones turned on, or do you talk about more structural? Because either one you can look in terms of structure, right? Like how different they are. But even if how they fire, you can look at the structure of the ones that are fired compared to the ones, that also fired, right? You take, okay, so in a way, you could start deleting nodes out of the graph if they don't some type of threshold of firing. right? So you can think of it that way too.
So the
And-
nodes, sorry, Ilya, in this graph model, the nodes are neurons, like actual,
Yeah, actual neurons.
and they're connected if one can like signal or stimulate.
Right, if they actually touch it, if their dendrites touch.
Okay, so it's okay.
Yeah, so it was actually related to the neurons. It's just that, like, for the brain, they were trying to find like all of them. And so our paper was basically, we did a variation of Braun and Kerbosh, right? So Braun and Kerbosh is a way to find all the maximal cliques. We basically changed it to find all minimal K-cores.
Mm.
So we did an analog of Braun and Kerbosh for these type of things. But even that, I mean, I don't even think we're like back, I'll say, how old is that? Because I don't even think we were computationally capable to do everything they want, because technically, right, that was these neurons in the brain is a huge graph. It's a huge graph. So I think the goal is to, calculate them all, or find all these little pockets of memory of where they are in the brain.
I mean, I have a follow-up question, but let me allow for others to ask their questions so that later, if there's still more time, I could ask another question. Okay,
okay, no problem.
Yeah, the floor is open. So if you have a question, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Actually, I got a question.
Okay.
My question is about the first problem you discussed, the K-core problem. As far as I understood, you proposed a K-core transversal sets to come up with some valid inequalities to tighten the L relaxation of the problem,
right,
closer to the convex hull of the problem. But I didn't get what's the complexity of finding those Q-core transversal problem.
Right. So like to find the minimum is NP hard.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't find the minimum, we just find minimal. So
minimal.
Yeah, so those are like heuristics. So they're polynomial type of heuristics to find the minimals.
Okay.
Right? Because minimum vertex cover is NP hard, right? Unless you're in a certain graph structure. Minimum vertex feedback set is NP hard. But just finding a minimal one, right? Just finding a minimal one is basically like a greedy algorithm. You can, and hopefully it violates, right? If it violates, you throw it in. If it's not, then, I mean, technically, if you want to, you could actually implement as a sub-problem solving the true IP, but you might as well just go ahead and branch and then just kind of use the heuristic approach.
I got it, thanks.
No problem.
You said that K-core paper was accepted recently. Is there a version of it available online?
I don't think so. I mean, I can email it to you.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
Email me and I'll email it. Or I can just email it to Basket the email there. No, just email me. That's fine. It's fine. Either one.
Okay. I'll do it.
Copy me, Austin, please. I want that too. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you go back to that line graph type thing that you had for the strong rainbow? Yeah.
Okay.
Just wanted to understand that a little bit more. I kind of got a little bit lost. So the edges became nodes in the new graph H. And
yeah. So it's similar to the line graph, but it's not exactly the line graph. It's kind of like the line graph based on
common separation. So the edges
for creating shortest paths, right? So if these two edges can separate the same pair of nodes, then there's an edge between them in H.
So the two edges separate the same pair of nodes. That
Right.
means
So
the
look,
removal-
so you- so
Sorry.
prime example is basically look at AB and EF, right? So AB will separate AF. EF will also separate AF,
Okay.
right? So then there's an edge between. So AB and BD
Oh,
is
I
basically
see. Okay.
A and D, right?
Okay. So if you have a shortest path and critical edges like that on the shortest path, they should all form a clique in this pseudo line graph.
Yeah, so you can think of them kind of like Menger cuts, right?
Okay. Okay, I see why you need the, so I see why the lower bound vertex coloring is a lower bound on that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But technically it's possible that, so if you have a clique in the line graph side, it's not necessary that those edges all lie on the same shortest path. They could be on different shortest paths. They
Right.
have to separate the same pair of vertices, right?
Yeah, you talking about H, right? You're not talking about the line graph because the coloring on the line graph
Yeah,
is
sorry. Yeah, well, I keep calling your H the line graph. Sorry, the H.
Okay. Yeah.
So we could have a situation like BD and CE where they don't have an edge. So how come BD and CE don't have an edge?
So BD and CE.
Oh, sorry, never mind. It's shortest path. I thought BD
Yeah.
reduces. Okay, I see. Okay, it doesn't. But had the bottom edge CE, if that had been a path of length 3, let's say, right, just like CBDE, and you took out something in the middle from the lower path and took out some like BD from the upper path, they would still be adjacent, right? Because they still would be separators of C and E.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
No problem.
Okay, so are there any more questions? Okay, so I think this is a good time to end this virtual seminar. Thank you very much, Dr. Hicks. We're so grateful for having taken time off your busy schedule to deliver this seminar to us. I mean, we did enjoy it, and I can see folks really learned a lot from it. So thank you once again, and wish you a very good rest of your day.
All right. Well, thank you. And I appreciate the invitation. And it's good seeing people I know.
Thank you, Dr. Hicks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.